What's up, everyone? Welcome into the sweat. I would love to tell you that I was 100% for this one with the Celtics in the NBA Finals, but I've been yelling so much since the Game 7 win in Miami that it hasn't come back yet. So we got Celtics Warriors, June basketball. You just can't beat it. Let's bring in Matt Meiselman, Julian Edlow as well, a couple of DK analysts for NBA Best Bets. Guys, we're going to take a deep look here at some player props, at series odds, whole bunch of different things here. Adam Kaufman with you, if I didn't mention that, by the way. Some props to look at on the DK Sportsbook. And Edlow, we're going to begin with you. Celtics, they were plus 140 going into this series. Road underdogs in game one. We were going back and forth a little bit on Twitter earlier in the week when you were saying you didn't hate this spot, actually, for Boston to maybe jump in and surprise Golden State a little bit. But when I agreed with you, you second-guessed yourself. You have to decide now how much you do or don't hate this.
Yeah, I mean, when you're on board with my contrarian take, it definitely makes me think twice about it and consider that I might be on the wrong side. But the Celtics, I think the perception is probably that they're going to split these games in Golden State. And then the perception is probably that they'll split again in Boston because the Celtics have been much worse at home than they have on the road. And the Warriors are just a good team. But as it pertains to game one, the idea that this could be like a down spot for the Celtics seems kind of silly to me in game one of the NBA Finals with the most rest that they've gotten since between games 2 and 3 of the Bucks, which was weeks ago. The game one against Miami was a really tough spot. It was coming off a big game 7 win over the Bucks, and then you have to go right down to Miami and play. Then you factor in they're going to be without 2 starters. Marcus Smart they planned for, Al Horford by surprise. They were still up 8 at halftime of that game before the 22-2 run by Miami in the third quarter, and they ultimately dropped that game and then win game 2 in Miami in dominant fashion. I think that this is the game where you want to come in and catch the Warriors off guard. They've been off for a week. The Celtics are close to full strength. Maybe they'll be without Robert Williams, who is certainly dinged up. But the way that I'm playing this one for starters, I've put it in my best bets article on DK Playbook. Celtics plus 1.5 first half. I think they're going to get off to a really good start in this game, maybe a little bit of rust for Golden State. And then who knows if Golden State has its patented third quarter, which has been a struggle for the Celtics at home and where it goes from there. I think it's going to be a good close game, but I think the Celtics come out and have the better start.
Well, and you basically just described what happened in game one against Miami. Celtics got off hot against the Heat, and then obviously it all went to hell in the second half there. What do you think, Meiselman? Money line bet on the C's tonight. Feel good about it?
I don't feel great about them winning. I do think there's value, but actually the thing that Julian mentioned first is kind of interesting to me, where this idea that it's not so contrarian to be on the Celtics, I think that's specific to our little DraftKings Boston bubble. And outside of that, most people like the Warriors for the series, for the game, for everything. So don't be nervous, Julian, that Kaufman is with you on this contrarian take. He's a Celtics fan. Like, we're all just going to like the Celtics. So it's still contrarian despite the fact that he's in on it. But as far as the specifics for the game, I am a little concerned about Robert Williams. And I think that there's a decent chance that he doesn't play. If he does play, I think you take the 3.5 points, you take the money line. I think the first half is a reasonable call, where if the Celtics are a little more fatigued than the Warriors, I think we see that manifest more in the second half of the game than the first half of the game. This is basically what we saw with game one against the Heat, where the Celtics were good in the first half and got tired in the second half. I think that's an overall trend to expect. When a team is more tired, it actually shows up later in the game. So first half, I think, is a reasonable call. I don't know that I'm picking the Celtics outright to win, but I think plus 140 is a value. I'm just not as excited about it if Robert Williams doesn't wind up playing.
Rob Williams with the left knee soreness. He is the only player on Boston's injury report right now. So Marcus Smart, don't worry about that sprained ankle. He's going to play. There has been some chatter about Williams maybe sitting out just to get him that full week of rest going into this series. But still, I mean, with what some of the other guys behind him have looked like, Daniel Tice in particular, you'd like more Rob if you can get it. We do know, though, he is a stellar defensive player on obviously the league's top defensive team. The Warriors, no slouches defensively either. So Julian, back to you here. 212.5. That's the number in terms of the over-under for tonight for game one. How do you feel about it, knowing that these offenses have the ability to break out, but also, again, stingy D?
Yeah, game one totals are hard because we want to see what the series looks like, right? What's the game plan going to be on both sides? So, like, personally, I'm not betting the total tonight, but I lean to the over And I lean to the over because obviously we have two defensive teams here, yet oh wow, and it's gone up since I've even looked at it. So apparently people
214 now.
agree. But yeah, it's two, defensively efficient teams, but they're both very talented on offense. And if Robert Williams is out, or he's definitely going to be limited if he plays, that takes away one of the best defensive weapons in the series. And I think that the Celtics half court defense is so good, and the Celtics half court defense matches up so well with the Warriors if they play slow and get into a half court, that Golden State is going to try and run and get quick shots off. And I think that whether they go in or not is going to dictate the pace to a degree, and that we see more shots earlier in this series before things, as they always do, tighten up down the stretch in bigger series. So I lean over in game one and to begin with, and these totals slowly start kind of creeping down and going under.
The interesting thing, Matt, is, you think of the Warriors and the Splash Brothers and Steph and Clay, and it's, well, they're going to be raining threes, taking a million attempts. It's actually Boston, between these two teams anyway, that is more reliant on the three, whereas the Warriors are more prone to attack the basket. And if you don't have Rob Williams out there, there could be a lot of opportunities on the inside, even though Boston is, the bigger team between the two. So how do you feel about 214?
Well, first of all, yeah, it's not a lack of homework that got you to say 212.5. This moved like in the last 10 minutes. So I don't know what's going on that caused the total to jump 1.5 this fast.
Do you think Matt, do you think no Rob Williams would be worth 1.5 to the total? Because I'm with you. I don't think he plays.
Yeah, so that's actually my concern. And it's not just him specifically. So I think in general, Rob Williams not playing will boost point scoring in the game, because I don't think the Celtics want to play Daniel Tice. I think they'll play more of Grant Williams and Derek White and go smaller. Tice looked awful last series in the minutes he did play. But the other thing that happens if Rob Williams doesn't play is that Kevon Looney also probably plays less minutes, because they don't need that matchup as much. So I think if Rob Williams is out, not only do you get a higher pace and worse defense from Boston, you also are going to get it from Golden State, where maybe they're more willing to go with their smaller lineup. Maybe they're more willing to play Jordan Poole, Klay Thompson, Steph Curry, Andrew Wiggins, all those guys on the court together. But the reason that I don't really have a strong take for this is I have no idea what the minutes are going to look like for the role players on either side. Obviously, we're not sure about Rob Williams, but I don't know how much Otto Porter is going to play, Andre Iguodala, Gary Payton II. Yep. There's just so much uncertainty here. So if all of those guys were playing big minutes, I would definitely like the under, but the less those defensive-oriented players are out there, the more the over will look good. So it's just very difficult to say. I think I'd probably wait for a starting lineup before betting the total for this game, because I think it could go a lot of ways based on the rotations.
Peyton Pritchard, another guy who sort of not fell out of favor, but it wasn't as useful late in that Miami series. He could see more run here against the Warriors as well. Something to think about. Player props as we continue on with NBA best bets. They're always interesting ones. Scanning them quickly here in the DK Sportsbook. You got Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, 3+ 3-pointers each. Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, 25 points plus each. You can look at Draymond Green, triple-double. That just scratches the surface. Again, Matt, you have a million different options here. What stands out to you?
So I'm going to take something I think that is way more boring than all of the stuff you just said, because yes, it's fun to root for these alternate point totals and alternate 3-point totals. I don't really see why there would be value on any of that. Like, to me, if anything, this game is probably going to be lower scoring than people expect. And also the prices for these alternate lines, I just never really like them that much. But there's a head-to-head line. I know this is similar to the one Julian liked, but Al Horford's rebounds versus Kevon Looney's rebounds. If we get Robert Williams not playing, Horford's got to play more 5. I really don't think Tice is going to play much in this series either way. And then Looney plays less. So the Williams either not being there or reduced minutes, I think helps Horford out-rebound Kevon Looney, who I think could lose some minutes there. And maybe everyone's taking for granted that Looney is now suddenly this very important part of the Warriors' rotation. But when they're healthy, he plays 20 to 25 minutes. I don't think we should expect 30 minutes, even with maybe Payton and Porter and Iguodala all somewhat limited. I still think Looney being out there for 3/4 of the game is kind of a ridiculous assumption. So I think Horford should out-rebound him for the series. There's props on that too. But for game one, especially if Williams isn't playing, I think Horford is the Celtics' main rebounder, and Looney probably loses a little bit.
Jules, Matt going first. Matt, more time for you to peruse the DK Sportsbook. What'd you find?
Yes, and while I was perusing, believe it or not, I did actually read the questions for this segment. I'm supposed to
Awesome.
save head to head for next, right?
Yes, please do.
Okay,
Okay,
well,
I'll save my head to head. Matt pulled a me and broke the rules and just said whatever he wanted.
We don't need to go to him next.
Okay, strictly for the props. Okay, so a couple ways to go here, and I like everything that Matt's onto. I like, and I think we can kind of go that route. But so Draymond Green points wise, and this will tie into my head to head. He doesn't look to score early in series. He scores more as the series goes on and those closeout games approach, and you kind of need it more. He's not like he knows the Celtics are going to give him shots, and he's not going to take them in this game because he's going to be looking to distribute, especially if this becomes a small ball game with no Robert Williams and Derek White's on the floor and Poole gets more minutes and that's another dribble handoff guy. So like Draymond Green is not going to attempt shots. He scored 8 total points in his 2 games against the Celtics. Draymond Green under 8.5 points feels pretty good in this one. And then the other one just ties into Williams. If Rob Williams doesn't play, again, we need to see what the rotations look like. Boston might be forced into some small ball, but I still think Grant Williams gets significant run, whether he starts or not. So Grant Williams props maybe a points or rebounds or combined over if there's no Robert Williams makes some sense.
Well, especially if you could lay it down on the series too, knowing that Rob Williams, there's just no way he's going to play in all 7 of these games. He had so much trouble playing back-to-backs. Even when the finals a little more spread out, we'll find out. But he's basically missed half this postseason so far. Let's go to those head-to-heads, Jules. Again, points, rebounds, assists. Break it down however you want. You could do Curry versus Tatum head-to-head points. You could do Wiggins and Brown rebounds, Green and Smart assists. What do you like here?
Yeah, as you said, with all of these random combinations that you've mentioned, you can bet on basically anything you want. So there's no lack of options. I'm keeping it simple. Game 1, a juicy Al Horford minus 160 to outscore Draymond Green. I laid out why Green isn't going to score, but for Horford, I'm just assuming that whether Robert Williams is out or not, he's going to be extremely limited. And that means a lot of Horford at center or just Horford on the floor. Like he's not going to sit much. He'll play 36 minutes or whatever in this game. And he's going to shoot. The paint touches against the smaller Golden State team is key, so they could make a point of going to Horford in the post a little bit where he's been productive. And then the pick and pops with Smart, Tatum, Brown. We know that Horford's going to take those threes. So I just see, like, you look at the range of outcomes here at minus 160. Obviously, you're exposing yourself to, lose a decent amount of juice. But if you lose this, what is it? Like 8 points for Green, 6 for Horford, and you lose an ugly one. That's the floor. What's the ceiling of this? Would anybody be surprised if Al Horford scores 18 points tonight and Draymond Green scores 4? Like that's a very realistic outcome, and this bet just smashes. So I feel like even at minus 160, there's so many more ways to win this than lose it.
Matt, do you have anything you'd like to add to the head-to-heads?
Oh, of course, because I already wasted my answer, so I have to find a new one.
Yep.
I do think that there's something that's mispriced that connects a head-to-head from the series with the game. So for the series, Draymond Green is close to even money for the leader in assists, and Marcus Smart is plus 300. I like Smart a lot here, and if we need an indication as to why, for tonight's game, it's basically pick 'em between the two guys. I don't want to bet Smart over Green on an individual game at even odds, but I think that the assist leader should be a pretty even race between Smart, Curry, and Draymond. I think it could kind of go to any of those 3. And I lean towards Smart a little also just to have a higher assist series in general. I think the Warriors' defensive style is a little different than Miami, where the Heat are trying to double the ball a lot and force the Celtics to, I guess, pass it around the perimeter and not have Tatum and Brown going one-on-one. And I think that that's conducive to Smart just having a better opportunity to drive and kick in this series than he did last series, where in last series, you had Tatum as more of the facilitator than we're used to seeing. And then we also had Smart playing injured last round, and he seems perfectly healthy. So maybe that's the biggest key. Like, I think Smart comes into this series with his ankle feeling better. He's not on the injury report, unlike Robert Williams. I think he's totally okay. Mm-hmm. So for the full series, plus 300 to have the most assists, like I think he should be in the 100 somewhere, maybe 200. I think he has as good of a shot as anyone, and it's weird to me that Draymond is so far ahead of him for that.
We don't have time to talk about it, unfortunately, but don't forget on the DK Sportsbook, you could bet on an individual player's PRA, points, rebounds, assists in total for an entire game. You can look at Jason Tatum, 40.5 tonight, just to sort of wet the whistle a little bit. We're going to let these guys go for now. Ed Lowe's coming back for more NBA talk later in the show. Meiselman gets a longer break, but he will be with you on the slate later on this afternoon, so make sure you check that out after the 4 o'clock Madden Sim for a whole lot more previewing Game 1. So, guys, thank you very much. The sweat rolls on after this with our NHL opening face-off. Stay tuned. What's up? Welcome back to the Sweat, and it is time for our NHL opening face-off. It is not just the NBA playoffs. You got action on the ice as well. We bring in our crew from RotoWire, AJ Scholes, as well as Paul Bruno, and also host or co-host. You know what? Let's just call him host because he's here and his co-host isn't. Pete Jensen from the Fantasy on Ice podcast there, involved with the NHL. Guys, before we get a look at Game 2 between the Oilers and Avs a little bit later on tonight, of course, Game 1 between the two-time defending champion Lightning and the Rangers last night went heavily to New York. Commanding fashion, tripled them up, as a matter of fact, AJ. Any big takeaways from that game?
How about 6 goals being allowed by Vasilevsky? Like, that's just unheard of at this point in the postseason. You know, and the fact that 5 of them were at even strength here, so you can't really blame, power play situations. Yesterday, I said the key for the Rangers was figuring out Vasilevsky, and very clearly they did that in Game 1. I would expect to bounce back from him in Game 2, but maybe we should temper expectations that these are going to be a bunch of no goals games in this series. Clearly, the Rangers have some firepower here, and they put it on display last night.
Paul, was this a reminder to the Lightning that they're not allowed to win every single year?
Well, there's also a little bit of history here. I mean, go back to the Leafs series. Game 1, the Leafs waxed them 5-0, and we all know how that series turned out. Eventually, they exerted their advantage and experience, and I think we're going to see the same thing here. They also had that remarkable record with Vasilevsky coming off a loss. He hasn't lost 2 straight after 16 previous losses, so I expect that form to hold. And I'm not too worried about things from the Tampa point of view. But give the Rangers credit. They answered the bell. They certainly didn't look like they were afraid of the stage like I thought they might be. But a lot of this had to do with Tampa being rusty as well.
Well, and obviously, looking at this, Pete, the goal always on the road to start off a series is let's just get the split. Doesn't matter if you take game one or game two. So no need to panic for the Bolts.
No, they don't have to panic. They haven't lost back-to-back games in the past 3 postseasons combined. Everybody knows that stat by now. All they need to do is send it back home tied, and I think they'll be in pretty good shape. Don't want to overreact too much to the Rangers here, but I do think they made quite a statement here, especially after everybody was kind of looking at them as, hey, you're beating backup and third string goalies every step of the way. Now they just beat the best goalie in the league. So give them a little bit of credit. Wanted to also give a shout out to Philip Hedl. That's someone I have my eye on fantasy wise because he's got 5 goals in his past 3 games. But when you look at the bigger picture, he's only 22 years old. Next year, if Ryan Strome isn't back, potential UFA, he could be the number 2 center of the future. Former first-round pick for New York in 2017. Looked like a bust early on, but he was in the bottom 6. He could be in the top 6 next year, so keep an eye on that.
Guys, 8 goals in game one of that series. That's a slow night at the rink compared to game one that we saw between the Oilers and Avs. 14 goals in that game. Absolutely absurd. So as we look ahead to game 2 tonight, and Pete, will go right back to you. I mean, what are the expectations for one? But also, if you're looking at fantasy, if you're looking at showdown contests, how do you decide where to captain when there was so much production there in game 1 across the board?
Right. No, it's an offensive minded series to say the very least, one of the highest scoring conference final games ever. So yeah, I'm keeping it simple here. I built my lineup around the 3 best players in the series, McDavid, McKinnon, and my captain is Leon Draisaitl. I made room for all those guys. I got some nice value, but Draisaitl, not enough people are talking about this guy. He helped them battle back in game 1. They almost tied the game. He is a absolute wizard passing the puck. He has 6 straight multi-assist games. No player in NHL history has ever done that. And also, if you compare ceilings, who has a higher ceiling than the guy that has the most points in the NHL over the past 2 rounds since the start of the second round? And that's Draisaitl with 19 points in 6 games. So give me a guy that's scoring 3 points per game right now over the past couple of weeks as my captain.
Paul, do you have a favorite captain here?
Yeah, I'm looking for another goal fest tonight, and I'm not even sure that you give the goalies a sniff at all in your lineups. I think it's going to be a high-scoring game. You might see 3 or 4 goalies tonight again. All 3 of the Avs top guns had a goal and an assist in their last game, and I look for each of them to continue their role tonight. Landeskog is the guy that I'm looking at to captain my team, though. He has 37 goals in the 62 games that he's played this season, including the playoffs. He's enjoying one of the best streaks of his season offensively of late, too, with 6 goals and 5 helpers in his last 10 starts. And he's on McKinnon's wing as usual, so that's a great spot to be in. I'll save big bucks by using him as my captain for $11,700, and then I'll make sure I get McKinnon in as one of the other guys as well.
What about you, AJ?
Well, I love both the plays that these guys outlined. So I'll give you a third option here just to confuse things even more. Looking at Evander Kane for 12-3 as the captain tonight. Unbelievable scoring upside. He had 2 points in game 1, and that will give you the flexibility you need to get both McDavid and McKinnon into your lineup, which I agree with Pete is super important. So I'll go with Kane. But if you like Colorado more, I think Landeskog is also in play. He's similarly priced. And then, of course, yeah, Pete's absolutely right. Draisaitl has to get a long extended look here. So 3 good captain options for you without having to pay for either of the 2 top guys.
AJ, I got to tell you, you've really classed up the background since the last time I saw you.
I'm borrowing some space at my in-laws right now. We're traveling right now, so had to find the best background I could in the house.
Sharp, looking sharp. Let's stay with you here for value. Looking at this showdown contest, where do you find it?
Well, look, it's probably the chalkiest play there is, but at this point, you have to at least consider JT Compher. He's got 4 goals in the last 2 games. Like, how do you not at least give him a look? But other than that, I think Kyler Yamamoto at 4,600 makes a lot of sense. The Oilers shuffled up their lines after we had talked yesterday, and Draisaitl's back centering his own group with Kane and Yamamoto. So you can grab the extra share of that trio by getting Yamamoto for a really discounted 4,600.
Pablo, value.
I'm looking at Zach Hyman. He has to be a top consideration because he's on a 6-game heater, 7 goals in that stretch. He may have the best assignment of all skaters tonight, riding shotgun with Connor McDavid. He gets to play on the power play with McDavid and Draisaitl and costs only $7,600 in this prime role. AJ touched on Colorado's third line. I will as well. I'm going to look at a guy like Andrei Burakovsky taking his turn to shine. That line's been effective and a bit of a difference maker for Colorado in the playoffs, and he only cost $4,200 tonight.
Any alternate options for you, Pete?
Yeah, I'm actually sticking with that third line in Colorado, but I'm taking the other guy. You guys mentioned Comfer, who's hot, Burakovsky, not playing that many minutes, but definitely packs a punch whenever he's on the ice. And I like Newhook by association, Alex Newhook, young player, points per 60 metrics, really strong throughout his career. He has 2 assists in 3 playoff games, and he was covering shots on goal and blocked shots. He had multiple shots and multiple blocks in game 1. So again, we're going to see the ripple effect of this high scoring series throughout the lineup on Edmonton's side, but more likely than not, I think Colorado's second and third line guys will outperform Edmonton's over the long haul this series.
Well, listen, playoffs are the best. We've talked NBA. We'll do more of it later. NHL playoffs. Baseball is coming up here on the Sweat. It's not nearly as exciting this time of year as the postseason, but there's still lots of DFS plays to look at. We're going to get to that with our crew. But AJ, Paul, Pete, thank you very much, and we'll catch you again down the line.
Thank you, guys.
Back here on the Sweat, about halfway home, and as I highly publicized, we have a great baseball segment with you with an even better crew. Steve Buchanan, as well as Gary and Thorne, of course, DK analysts, and then you have Eric Halterman from RotoWire. Guys, we're focusing specifically on DFS right now as we take a look at MLB Price Check, our favorite plays at certain price points tonight. Bukes, we're going to start with you, my friend. A pitcher, $8,500 or more. Who do you like?
Yeah, giving us so many options to choose from on a 6-game slate. Thanks for setting the bar, well enough at 8,500 or above. So whatever. I guess I'll choose Sean Manaea going against the Brew Crew, who, they strike out a lot against lefties, 24.3% K rate against lefties. Manaea's been a little up and down this season, not the guy I think that the Padres were hoping for when they acquired him from the fire sale that was the Oakland Athletics, but he's been more than serviceable, has some really strong strikeout upside, and going against this club that is very poor against lefties overall and does provide some of that strikeout upside. I think at 9,700 for Manaea tonight is one of the better pitching options on this very small 6-game slate.
So that in mind, Erica, I guess I feel like I'm not giving you that many choices, but what do you have?
Yeah, there's 4 guys in this category, I think, and there may be only 2 if there's rain in that Angels-Yankees game, which looks like it might be coming as of this morning. I'd side Tony Gonsolin over Sean Manaea because Manaea's been a bit shaky lately. And I'm a little bit worried about that park there. Gonsolin at least gets to pitch in Dodger Stadium, gets a tough matchup against the Mets. I wouldn't be picking him, I don't think, on other slates. But Taijuan Walker on the other side, not a great season by anything other than ERA. His ERA is actually quite good, but doesn't look like it to remain that way. Not really getting any strikeouts this season. And with the Dodgers lineup backing him, I think he has a decent shot at the win. Gonsolin's having a really strong season. 180 ERA isn't going to last, but the ERA estimator's in the mid threes, striking out above average number of batters, a couple too many walks, but not way too many. And he's actually getting ground balls at a pretty high clip for the first time in his career. 6 innings pitched in 3 straight starts after averaging just 4.5 over his first 6 is also encouraging. And he's got 7 strikeouts in all 3 of those. So he's been pitching well. He's got good external factors to make up for the fact that he's got a pretty tough matchup here. So with limited choices, he's my top one.
So Gary, do you want to go with one of these guys that might get rained out, or you want to just flip a coin between the other two?
No, I mean, those are clearly the 2 top options on this slate. I might lean Gonsolin just because he's a little cheaper. And the fact that as my fire alarm goes off.
Oh boy. Clear out. Get
I
out.
might lean Gonsolin.
This is just a hot take is what this is.
I guess, yeah. Really, just scorching hot take here.
Must roster tonight. Get him in.
Yeah, okay, I think it stopped. That's nice. As I regain my train of thought. I think Gonsolin might have a lower ownership just because people are afraid of the Mets. I think the numbers with Manaea are a little scary. In his last 6 starts, he's allowed at least 3 earned runs in each of his past 6 starts. However, that being said, we are looking at someone who's, rocking like a 13.5 swinging strike rate this season. Manaea has had strikeout numbers that we've never seen from him so far, so that's enticing. And also the Brewers, I mean, Steve alluded to this, but it's striking how different a team they are depending on the handedness of the starting pitcher. They have a 108 WRC plus when they are facing a righty. That drops to an 84 WRC plus when they are facing a lefty, which kind of makes sense. I mean, Colton Wong, Rowdy Tellez, Christian Yelich, all their best hitters are left-handed. And the guys who were supposed to be their lefty mashers, Willie Adames and Hunter Renfroe, are currently on the IL. So from a matchup perspective, I think you have to go with Manaea, but I do think he'll be higher owned. So I might lean Gonsolin.
Bukes, what level of dedication do you think Garion has to this show? Like, if we start to see smoke coming up behind him, would he have turned into the dog in the "this is fine" meme? What would it, or would he just run for the door?
You would have to kill Garion to get him off this show.
I'm going down with this building so then I can haunt it because that's what it deserves.
Bukes, hitters 5K or over. Who do you have?
Yeah, let's go with Austin Riley, who has been absolutely crushing it at the plate, and he gets to play in Coors Field for a series. The Rockies desperately need Austin Gomber to go deep into this game because that bullpen yesterday against the Marlins combined for 7 2/3 innings and gave up 11 runs during the doubleheader that they played yesterday and last night. 9.2 average against lefties for Austin Riley in terms of DraftKings fantasy points. Going against lefties has been the matchup for him that you want to target with him. 444 WOBA, 321 isolated power, and a 184 WRC plus. He's absolutely crushing in this type of matchup. Over under for this game is set at 11.5. Unders have been the name of the game so far this season. I think that game goes over today with the pitching matchup and all the bullpen guys they had to use for the Rockies yesterday. Give me Austin Riley in this matchup against Gomber.
Same to you, Mr. Halterman. Hitters 5K and up.
Yeah, I'm going to stick in that same lineup and go with Ozzie Albies right at 5K. Hasn't had a particularly good this season, but it's Ozzie Albies against lefty. You always like Ozzie Albies against lefty, even if it's not in Coors Field. Even this season, when he hasn't really been good against anybody, he's still striking out less than half of the time against southpaws compared to righties, just over 10% against lefties, just over 21% against right-handers. For his career, he's got a 94 WRC plus against righties, which is very unimpressive to say the least. That's 1 point better than Kurt Casale's career mark for reference there. And he's got 141 against lefties for his career, which is 1 point better than Ronald Acuna, who you may have heard of. He's a pretty good hitter on that same Atlanta team. So whenever you get Albies against the lefty, you got to be interested. I don't think his poor start this season is enough, especially given that it's Coors Field here. I don't think that's enough to make me look elsewhere.
Gary, no visible flames. That's a good thing. Bring us a hot take here.
Not overly hot, especially if there's going to be a bunch of rain in New York. That would cool things down. I'm going to keep trying this until it can't happen. Like Aaron Judge against Reed Detmers is a hilariously terrible matchup for Reed Detmers. Steve and I, we got caught for hating on Detmers a couple weeks ago. Just so happened it was the miracle game where he threw a no-hitter. Since then, he started 2 games. He's given up 8 earned runs and 4 home runs. He's not good. I don't care that he threw a no-hitter. And Aaron Judge, I don't understand the algorithm and placing him. I don't like, okay, maybe he's the 4th or 5th most expensive outfielder. He should be the most expensive hitter on this slate. He leads baseball in barrel rate. He leads baseball in expected slugging percentage at 750. He has the highest expected WOBA against left-handed pitching, not just this season, but going back to like 2019. That's how much Aaron Judge crushes lefties. This is just a ridiculously bad matchup for Reed Detmers. I wanted it to happen last night. I'm crossing my fingers and hope it actually happens tonight. We'll see. But if this game gets going, you have to have Aaron Judge in the lineup.
No lack of options when it comes to value, Eric. Who do you like?
Let's go with Clint Frazier at 2,300. Hasn't gotten to play all that much this season. Been exactly a league average hitter in 34 plate appearances. But in 4 games since returning from appendicitis, which, if anybody needed another strange medical malady, it was definitely Clint Frazier. He hasn't had it hard enough so far in his career. But in 4 games since his return, 3 for 7 with 3 walks and a steal. So he's been hitting well. He's been in the lineup against every lefty. So he should be there against Matthew Liberatore here, who is an interesting prospect, but not the tier prospect where you think he's going to immediately take over and be this pitcher you don't want to use anybody against. He's got 1 bad start and 1 good one so far. I don't know if there's enough about Frazier to say that he's definitely a strong hitter, but I think he's a competent one. Got a 110 WRC plus since the start of the 2020 season. That kind of hitter at 2,300, I think is a great deal, and I wouldn't pass it up here.
Garen, I see you scanning DFS options at value. Who do you like?
I'm going to go with Jesse Winker. At some point, I think it has to turn around. I mean, it has to, right? Mariners fans probably think they're cursed at this point, but Winker's expected WOBA is about 80 points higher than his actual WOBA. He's hitting the ball well. He's just not finding the holes right now. Still, the Mariners have been batting him leadoff against right-handed pitching in the last couple of weeks, so I think that's a huge boost to his value at $3,800. Also a boost to his value, the presence of Jordan Lyles, who has struggled immensely with left-handed bats so far this season. 511 slugging percentage, 382 WOBA to opposing left-handed bats. I'm just going to keep saying Jesse Winker's going to break out of this at some point. Hopefully it's tonight.
Bukes, bookend the segment.
Yeah, not guys in the bottom of the lineup is something I'm usually looking for, but Trent Grisham, since he's moved down in the order, feels like he's actually hitting better than when he was hitting leadoff, and he's got a good matchup tonight against Adrian Hauser. Obviously, we can't bank on a ton of at-bats against him because he's in the lower part of the order, but what I do like is that with men on base, Grisham is hitting like almost 300 in that scenario. So hitting that low in the order with how good the hitters are above him puts him in a good spot here. Hauser has not been good against lefties. So I think this is really an intriguing spot for someone who has some pretty poor numbers overall, but as of late has been hitting better, averaging 9 DraftKings fantasy points over his last 5 games. 2 of those games, 18 DraftKings fantasy points logged. So it's not usual that I'm going this low in the order, but Grisham's been hitting well and he's in a good matchup tonight. So I think him at under that 3K range at 2,300 is a good spot for him tonight.
Steve, Gary, and Eric, thank you much, fellas. We're going to get back to NBA. Take a look at Showdown, DFS Showdown for the Celtics and Warriors. Game 1 tonight out in San Francisco. That's coming up on the other side. Let's get back to game one of the NBA Finals coming up tonight. San Francisco Celtics and Warriors, of course, meeting in the finals. Should be a lot of fun. Should be a long series, hopefully. Anyway, you got three Celtics backers right here talking to you, so we'll hope that we can be at least relatively impartial. Julian Edlow, Jeff Pratt jumping in here with us, guys, and top DFS plays on this showdown tonight. As one would expect, Jason Tatum, Steph Curry, they are the two highest priced players when it comes to obviously captaining a guy. So are you going to go with one of them, Julian, or would you like to have maybe a more balanced, opportunity there in the utility spots and a cheaper captain?
Yeah, I think as the series goes on, you see more of that star power and maybe you want to spend up a little more at captain. I'm not sure exactly what we're going to see off the bat here, so I think it's tough to justify paying up quite as much. But if we want to go mid-range, like I know if you watch the betting segment with Matt and I earlier, we talked a lot about Al Horford because Rob Williams is either going to not play, which I kind of lean towards, or play and be limited because he just wasn't the same guy that we saw earlier. So it's a good matchup for Horford from a size perspective, in terms of scoring in the paint, getting more rebounds with a limited Williams, and stepping out and shooting the three. I just see a balanced game there from Horford, and that's kind of a balanced captain's pick.
What's going to be interesting, though, Jeff, is, obviously, like DraftKings, for instance, has a millionaire contest for this showdown tonight. So it's going to be difficult to have a lineup that isn't going to be duplicated a million times, whether it's Tatum or Steph or, Jaylen Brown in the captain spot, Smart, Al Horford. Like, you almost want to go with somebody like Gary Payton II, who's going to play tonight. It looks like, according to Shams Charania, he's on track to play. He's super cheap, and you could, again, load up in the utility. What's your goal ultimately if you're looking for a little differentiation?
Yeah, I'm not sure if you're going to find that much differentiation here in what I'm looking for personally. To touch on Gary Payton quickly, it sounds like he'll be back. I know that Anthony Slater said that it's not positive if he's going to jump right back into the rotation. So I'd be wary of role players like him, especially a guy who's been out for so long. But yeah, Julian, I'm right with you. I think Al Horford is a really good option here at 11.4K. I said it yesterday when I was on, but there are so many different lineups that these teams can run. So I'm wary of picking a role player at captain until we see a game and get a feel of how these guys are going to be used. I know that Al Horford is going to play 30-plus minutes tonight, regardless of if the Warriors go big with Kevon Looney or small with Jordan Poole. There is a place for Horford on the court, and he doesn't need to score a lot to produce. From a fantasy perspective, he's at double-digit rebounds in 3 of his last 5 games, at least 3 assists in every game since the end of April versus the Nets. And he's really been racking up the blocks lately too. So I'm rolling with a 35-year-old Horford. He's apparently found the fountain of youth as well. I think there are a couple of options that you can look at paying down wise. I think Derek White is a guy who I highlighted. I think he's going to see the floor a lot. But right now, I'm rolling with guaranteed production, and you're getting that in Al Horford.
What we found here is the model to follow if you're a guy on the wrong side of 35 in the NBA. Find a team that's willing to sit you for half a season, then you come back incredibly fresh the next year. So thank you, Oklahoma City Thunder. Jeff, let's stay with you. Who are you going to stack with Horford then?
Yeah, since I paid in the middle here for captain, I can afford to pay up a little bit here. I won't be taking one of the studs, but I will roll with Marcus Smart at 8,200, continuing the trend of rostering these mid-level guys who I know are going to play massive roles in tonight's game. This is the biggest stage of Marcus Smart's career. He's the first point guard to win DPOY since Gary Payton, and he's tasked with containing the most unstoppable offensive point guard the game has ever seen. The narratives are just flying off the rails here. And then on the offensive side of the ball, he's really embraced the role as Boston's true point guard, and he does it all. He scores relatively consistently. He sets up his teammates. He's really active on the glass. Considering he's probably going to play 35-plus minutes tonight, that's all you need for DFS production.
What we're hearing here, Julian, basically is that Ime Udoka is going to have a really thin rotation, and guys are going to play a lot of minutes.
Yeah, not only that to, keep smashing the Boston side of things, but for the Warriors, all the cheaper value guys they would have are no longer value because you have names. Gary Payton is going to be back, we now know. It sounds like Otto Porter Jr. should be back. Andre Iguodala is either coming back or at some point coming back. So, the value guys they had that were filling those roles are now off the board. We don't know what we can expect from the guys that are coming back, so it makes it much more difficult to roster the Warriors. So what I will say here, going with Horford, you can afford to get at least one star in there. So I think either if you're going to go that mid route, even if you go with Marcus Smart, like Jeff said, Tatum or Curry has to be in your lineup, one of those two guys. And we don't really even need to add analysis there. They're just studs. They're going to play well. But the trickle down effect on the Boston side, I think, with Robert Williams, not playing as much, we'll see what type of role Peyton Pritchard has in a series like this. I think Derek White and Grant Williams are the two guys that pick up all those Williams minutes as kind of the fifth guys on the floor with the core four. And we'll see if it kind of how Golden State plays this. If it's more Looney, it probably dictates more Williams. If it's more Poole, it probably dictates more White, unless Boston wants to kind of scatter and go bigger when Golden State goes small or vice versa. But I would say Grant Williams and Derek White are the trickle-down plays behind Al Horford.
Time is short, so let's get a straight prediction from both of you guys here in terms of who's going to take game one and by how much. Julian, go ahead.
Yeah, like I said off the top of the show, I'm on the Celtics first half, but who's going to win the game and by how much? I think it's probably going to wind up being the Warriors by more than 3.5 points, which is all that matters. I'm not giving another number.
What about you, Jeff?
I think if Rob Williams somehow plays and is relatively productive and active, the Celtics have a chance of stealing this one, but I'm not sure that's going to happen. So I'm rolling with Warriors probably by around 7 or 8 points.
When the Celtics win by 15 tonight, you guys can play that back on tomorrow.
That would be fantastic.
Wonderful. I hope that you can.
All right. NFL Sportsbook talk coming up on the way. We're going to close things out with some football. So thanks to Julian. Thanks to Jeff. And like I said, football's coming up here on The Sweat. Stay tuned. One last segment here on The Sweat. We've got about 10 minutes left. It is the NFL Seeing the Future, checking futures bets for the 2022 NFL season with a couple of DK contributors, Jeff Ulrich and Pierce Dietrich. DK Sportsbook, guys, has been available for which team will lead the NFL in regular season scoring this year. The Bills, plus 550 favorites in that category. So, Moose, is that the smart play here, or do you see a better value in that spot?
I mean, obviously we like the Bills. I mean, they're a good team. They were third in offensive in this category, just in terms of highest scoring teams last year. But I mean, you look down this list and, the fact you can get bigger odds on teams like the Chiefs, the Cowboys, even who led the NFL in this category and just pure points scored last year. The Bills just can't really be the bet here. I personally prefer the Bengals. I mean, you've got a second year of Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase going after it. You've got an improved offensive line in Cincinnati as well. I get that people are expecting a Super Bowl hangover, but even if the Bengals defense does start slow or something, it's just going to mean that they're going to get in more shootouts. They're going to be relying on their offense more anyways. So I think that for this category especially, I mean, there are numerous plays here down the board we could look to. The Bengals stick out. People are all over the Eagles at plus 1,500. I guess I don't hate that, but what about the Colts too at plus 2,000? I mean, Jonathan Taylor, Now they have a quarterback who's not going to turn the ball over as much, likely. So lots of different ways you could go on this one. Not the Bills for me. They're the deserving favorites, but there is just way better value down the board.
You agree with that, Pierce?
No, I don't. I'll let Jeff chase the what ifs. We don't know who's going to have great seasons or what the schemes will be on these other teams, but we know everything about Buffalo. We know their players. We know their scheme. We know exactly what to expect. Yeah, the payout's not that great, but it's a pretty good payout for a team like Jeff mentioned, third most points last season. And when you look at this roster, do we think that they've peaked? I don't think that they've peaked at all. I think they're going to continue to get better. Josh Allen's going to get better. He's going to develop more rapport with his receivers. The line is there. And then you look at their draft. In the second round, they went with James Cook. He is a receiving running back, which tells us this team's going to continue to pass and pass. It's up-tempo. When you pass the ball, you stop the clock. That just means more Josh Allen. We want more Josh Allen. That means more points. I think this is going to be an explosive big-time year. Also, they play the NFC North, not a great division. They also play the AFC North, which I think is going to be a shootout division. Buffalo is the play.
Pierce, you could also bet on the lowest scoring team this season, and Texans unsurprisingly come in at favorites at plus 550 on the DK Sportsbook, just ahead of the Bears. The Atlanta Falcons, Matt Ryan's old team, is over there plus 600. So who do you like in this less prestigious category?
It's the Texans. The Texans are a bad team. They didn't do really anything to improve. They didn't get the head coach that they wanted. They wanted an offensive-minded head coach. They didn't get it, so they're not going to have the offensive scheme that they wanted. Davis Mills, he wasn't terrible, but that's because their expectations of him were incredibly low. Their offensive line is still terrible. Yes, they drafted a first-round offensive lineman. That's going to take a year or maybe two for that to develop. The running back and receivers are unremarkable. Cooks is fine. Their second-round receiver is fine. Marlon Mack is okay, but these guys aren't great. I bury the AFC South a lot, but ultimately their defenses in that division are decent, and they should have no problem limiting the Texans.
What do you think, Jeff?
Yeah, again, it's the same story as the offensive category. Pierce wants to bet the favorites. That's fine. Plus 550 is fine. But how do you not take a shot with the Seattle Seahawks here at plus 900? They're marching out Drew Lock and Geno Smith. It's 2022, guys. And we got a team. We can bet this team to be the lowest scoring team with Drew Lock and Geno Smith at plus 900. Pete Carroll's just drafting running backs. He's going to run the ball every single time, even when they're down 30. Plus 900 for the Seahawks has to be the bet here. Again, we're going to be going up against really good defenses in the Rams and the 49ers. And, even like the Cardinals don't even have a bad defense. But I'm going to bring up the Cardinals too. If you want to take a real long shot bet in this category, the Arizona Cardinals to be the lowest scoring team at plus 3,500. I mentioned they have a good defense. That's not a bad thing. This team is absolutely centric around Kyler Murray's success. What do we know about Kyler Murray? He runs a lot. He does get injured. There's also animosity around the contract. There's no DeAndre Hopkins. If something happens to Kyler Murray, the Arizona Cardinals are going to be terrible this year, and they will absolutely push to be one of the lowest scoring teams. So you want to take a real long shot in this division, lowest scoring team, go with the Cardinals at plus 3,500.
We only have about 2 minutes left, guys. Let's work in this last question. You got a good division-related category, head-to-head season matchups. You can find these under season specials on the DraftKings Sportsbook. Let's start in the NFC West. If you look at the Rams and the Niners head-to-head, okay? A Niners plus 380 to win both regular season matchups. Now, you look back, the Rams are the defending champs. You got to consider that, obviously. San Fran, though, did pull this off last year. So, Jeff, you like those odds?
Yeah, I do. One thing that we know about Kyle Shanahan is that he likes playing Sean McVay. And Pierce and I think, are going to be in agreement on this one. We're at least in agreement that we think the Rams are probably due for some regression this year. They're a little bit of an older team. They're very reliant around one or two players, which, if something happens to Cooper Kupp, yikes, right? So plus 3,800, I like this. It sounds like San Francisco is also potentially going to be jettisoning, Jimmy Garoppolo, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. Plus 38 or plus 380 is certainly not bad odds for me to take a shot on this. I do like San Francisco to sweep this one again.
Pierce, you've got about 30 seconds.
Yeah, the 49ers have the Rams number. The Rams are an overrated team. Their offensive line is going to take a step back this season without Andrew Whitworth, the Hall of Famer. And that's really how you beat them. The 49ers put pressure on the Rams in those 2 games during the regular season. That's how they won. I imagine they're going to keep that up. And that was a 49ers team that wasn't completely healthy, that was beating the future Super Bowl champions. I think the 49ers will definitely take the series.
All right. Well, that's been a show. A lot of NBA playoff previewing for tonight, NHL as well. Some baseball, some football. We covered it all. Thanks to Jeff, to Pierce, to everybody else, our entire behind the scenes crew making this show possible. Thanks for putting up with this voice over the last hour. The Sweat returns 11 a.m. Eastern tomorrow. A lot of game one reaction, hockey reaction as well. Make sure you check it out. We'll see you later.